So today I am going to tell you how to save your marriage if you are a dismissive avoidant or if you're married to a dismissive avoidant. And today I'm talking about the ethical dismissive avoidant. This is the person who is the people pleaser. They're very avoidant, like conflict avoidant in the way that they interact in the relationship with you. And what happens is in these relationships, sometimes they just burn it all to the ground, and there's some very specific reasons as to why and some things you can do to stop that before it happens and actually save your marriage. So you're going to want to hear this. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Ketra Thompson, and what I do with my clients is I combine several modalities to get them the results they want. So I'm a certified master hypnotist, so we use custom hypnotherapy. So we go all the way back on a subconscious level to reframe those protective functions that were formed when you were creating your attachment style, the emotional triggers, and then we add in relationship coaching and attachment style coaching so that you can step into a new way of being. So if you'd like to learn more, you can check out the link in the description below where you can set up a consultation call that's completely complimentary so that you and I can chat and that we can get to the heart of what's going on with you specifically and set up a custom plan just for you if that's something that interests you after having that discussion. So you can check that out. And as always, if you click like and subscribe, I would really appreciate it because you get notified every time I post a new video, and it does help me reach more people. So here's what usually happens when someone is a dismissive avoidant inside a marriage. We're talking about the ethical DA. Now, this is the person who's very much a people pleaser on the outside. This is how they present. They're very conflict avoidant. They do not like to have conflict. They avoid it at all costs. And they don't actually communicate very well, even though they don't realize it. And so what happens is there's a lot of resentment that builds up over time because they just keep doing things for their spouse, their family, and every time they're doing it, they're kind of checking a box mentally that creates resentment. I do this and I do this and I do this and I do this and nobody appreciates it. And I have to do everything. And I'm doing all the things and I'm supporting everyone. And in the process of this resentment building, they are not communicating it. And so the resentment gets huge. And one of the key things that you want to really remember, especially when we're dealing with the male dismissive avoidant in a marriage, is that they tend to focus on sex in a really big way. Now, sex is important. It's a really, really big deal in any committed relationship, but it's sort of the only way that they allow themselves to be loved. They don't let love come to them in other ways. So because they don't receive love in other ways, they're a little off balance when it comes to the sexual connection. They hyper focus on it, especially if it isn't present. Now, they'll still burn down their whole life and walk away from everything with resentment, even if sex is regularly happening, because it's a bigger issue than that. But they will point to the sex issue as the main issue. And they will create a lot of resentment around it because it's the only way they allow themselves to feel connected. And it isn't sustainable. So that's why even when sex is present, they'll still burn down the relationship because they don't have the chemical balance they need from other layers of connection that are necessary, and it catches up eventually. And so what you see in this is that the other partner tends to be very blindsided by the DA sort of burning it all down and leaving the marriage because they thought everything was fine. Because if they felt something, they would express it. If they needed something, they would express it. If they had a concern, they would express it. And because they do this, they think that the other person's doing it too. They think their dismissive avoidant partner is doing that too. So they think when they agree to everything, when they say yes to everything, they think it's because they want to, not because they feel like they have to. But the conflict avoidant partner really feels like they have to say yes to everything. They have to appease everyone. They have to jump through all these hoops, or else they're going to have a fight, an argument, and that is their biggest fear. They don't have capacity for an argument because there's so much of their own internal shame that any kind of discussion that makes them feel judged is going to cause them to go through a shame spiral, which I've talked about in other videos. So they avoid conflict at all cost. And the other person rarely knows that they're doing this because they just think they're functioning like they do. And that's a really big part of the issue. So I want to give you some very actionable steps, whether you are the DA or you're the anxious partner or even fairly securely attached partner that is blindsided by this. But first, I want to explain really briefly why this is so difficult. And that's because your subconscious programming is running over 95% of everything you think, feel, and do. And some new research is indicating maybe over 98% of everything you think, feel, and do. And the thing is, your attachment style is formed really early on when you're programming your subconscious mind. And because of that, your protective functions that are created during your attachment style creation are in the subconscious programming. They're very deeply rooted. And we don't have access to the subconscious mind easily after the age of 7. We do with trauma and complex trauma. We can kind of affect that a little bit, but we can't get in there easily. And usually the way we affect it is for the negative, not for the better. So it's a real issue because even though someone might not want to react a certain way or show up in a certain way, the subconscious is calling the shots. It's running the show. And so these protective functions are overwhelming to them. That feeling of running away or pulling back or shutting down is so overwhelming. It's like a flood, and there's nothing the person can do about it in the moment. And so doing the subconscious work is such a big deal because you can talk about this all day in your conscious mind, but if you aren't accessing your subconscious mind in the reprogramming process, then you're going to be using your willpower, which is very, very limited, and you're going to really struggle to make these changes. So when we get to the heart of what's going on in the custom hypnotherapy process, we reframe those old beliefs subconsciously so that you have a new operating system. So you have clarity and discernment around those things that were driving the unwanted behaviors, because right now, those younger versions of you don't have clarity. They don't have discernment, and you can't reach them. You can try to reason with them internally, but it doesn't work if you can't get to the heart of the issue. And that's why the hypnotherapy process is so incredibly profound in this scenario, in really affecting how we show up in our attachment styles and how we show up in the relationships in our life. And this is what I do with my clients every day, so they can stop being performative, so they can stop being the people pleaser, so they can stop avoiding conflict, and they can actually take care of those fear responses and the protective functions that are keeping them from functioning well. And so I'm going to give you some very specific steps. It's best if these steps are done together by both parties on both sides. That's where you're going to find actual stability and healing. But even if you just do your part, you will change the dynamic of the relationship, and you'll have to push past your own fears to do it. So first, I'm going to share what the dismissive avoidant needs to do to save that kind of relationship. So they've spent years denying their own needs. They've spent years not being attached to their needs and their feelings, and they have been disconnected from them. And so they didn't communicate them because they thought if they communicated them, they would have conflict. And then they avoided conflict. So they just did what the other person wanted them to do in hopes that they would get the sex they wanted and that they would avoid conflict. And in the process, they have starved the other person of some very important chemicals and connection points that need to be there to even create a sex drive in the other person, for one thing, but to create trust and connection in a really healthy way. So the first thing the DA needs to do is start identifying their own feelings. Get self-reflective. It's very hard for a DA to get self-reflective because there's a lot of shame, but they need to get curious and go, what am I feeling? When did I first feel that? Is it truly applicable in this situation, or is it also has to have to do with old pain? You've got to have some self-awareness, and then you've got to be able to identify your own needs. Here's what I need, and you've got to be able to communicate it. You got to stop being the people pleaser that jumps through the hoops. Your partner doesn't want you to be that people pleaser that jumps through the hoops. They just believe you when you say you agree because they would be honest with you. They don't think that you're not being honest. So you've got to pause before responding so that you can actually communicate what you want. If you don't want to go to this function, if you do want to do this other thing, if you want to try snowboarding, whatever it is, if you need a nap, you've got to start doing it on a regular basis, because what happens is you have all these suppressed needs that you haven't been meeting forever, and it's built up this huge amount of resentment. And so in order to stop the pile up of the sweeping under the rug, you got to stop sweeping under the rug. So that means you've got to start communicating every day, all the time. You can't wait till something big comes up. You've got to communicate the smallest preferences, the smallest needs all the time, so you can immediately stop any even minor buildup of resentment. And then you're showing up authentically. So if this causes waves and it causes conflict, you've got to be able to take a breath. You've got to be able to call a timeout. You've got to be able to regulate your nervous system so that you can have these conversations without taking it all so personally, without the fear of the judgment and the rejection. And that's all really, really much easier if you do the subconscious work. And so starting to use your voice and use boundaries, not to punish the other person, but to say, this is where I'm at. This is my capacity. This is what I need. You've got to be able to do that. And this is a very big deal for a DA. They do not do this well. And they usually struggle with how to even begin doing this. So getting some help in that process is really important. Now, part of why this is a big deal is you've got to get your focus off of sex being the only thing that's going to give you connection. We need other chemicals other than what we can get from the bond in sex. So our body gets oxytocin from physical touch and intimate connection. But if you're DA, you probably have high cortisol, which means you probably aren't absorbing the oxytocin the way you need to. So what you need is vasopressin. Now, vasopressin is the bonding chemical that happens like when people are at war together, when they are, it's not sexual, but it's problem solving based. So you're solving problems together, you're communicating, you're asking for input, you're being honest, you're being vulnerable, you're sharing. When there's enough vasopressin in a relationship, the sex drive goes way up in your partner. So you ultimately want that. That's been the thing you've focused on. And vasopressin is the key. And it's not just one time. Especially if you've depleted this partner of vasopressin for a long time, you need a lot of consistent, regular vasopressin so that when you do connect physically, you can absorb the oxytocin, and that boosts all these other chemicals in your body that create homeostasis and help your sleep and all of these things. So get your focus off sex. Get to the point where you're communicating every day how you're feeling, what you need, and actually inviting that other person into your mental, emotional world, talking to them, sharing these things with them, asking for their insight, problem solving together. And the last thing the DA really needs to work on is you've got to stop assuming that one day, 1 week, 1 month of this behavior is going to fix it all. It needs consistency over time to show the other person that you are actually changing. You actually have a new way of being. You actually know how to communicate and repair after conflict and sit in empathy and curiosity and all of these things. You need consistency. Now, if you are the anxious partner, or I would say even secure partner, but you're feeling blindsided by this DA that wants to burn it all down, you've got to realize first off, you thought that this person was telling you the truth the whole time. You thought they wanted what you wanted. You thought they were happy to do these things around the house or in life or whatever. And you've got to stop assuming that they want what you want. They don't. They've been telling you this, but it's a mask. It's their mask that they put up that they think is palatable to the world, that is acceptable. And they think that mask is going to get them maybe the sex they want, or it's just going to keep the peace so they don't have to have conflict. And so you've spent maybe years assuming this person's on the same page as you. They're not. they may not want what you want. They may have big feelings about all kinds of things. So the first thing you need to do is stop assuming that what they say is actually what they mean. And that's not healthy. It's not your job to read someone else's mind. It's not your job to overfunction and overcommunicate. But you've got to stop believing this because this is a pattern they've been doing. You've got to step back, look at the big picture view, and you've got to realize that the things they've said aren't necessarily true. So you need to pour into you. You need to do things that are good for you, that take care of you. But at the same time, you need to step toward connection as well, not forcing it, but you can lead by example. You can start identifying your feelings. You can start identifying your needs. You can start checking in with yourself and saying, this doesn't work. This does work. Here's what I'd like to see. Or, hey, can you brainstorm some ideas with me so that we can figure out how to meet these needs? You can move toward connection. And as you do that without being pushy, without being overbearing, it creates more connection instead of distance. But you've still got to be filling up your own life. You've still got to be taking care of your own needs. And so this is a two-part process where you're going to have to learn that partner in a new way. Like you're going to have to rediscover who they are because they haven't been presenting the totality of who they are to you all this time. They have layers and depth that you have never seen. And so you need to be curious about that and let it unfold as long as that dismissive avoidant is doing the work. And you'll have to accept the fact that this person is no longer going to agree with you in every way. And this is a big hurdle to overcome, but it can be done. And in my couples program, when I work with couples, we work together individually first. And it's really important because a lot of couples therapy just gets hung up on the arguments at hand, the bickering, the issues. That's not really the thing. It's deeper. It's the emotional triggers. It's the protective functions. It's the subconscious programming. It's the attachment style stuff. So we do the work on those things individually, and then we come together with the couples doing the coaching part of it. So now they can implement this new way of being once the emotional triggers have been taken care of. Because it's the emotional triggers underneath that we've attached a story to, that we have meaning that we've assigned to, that completely derail us. So when someone doesn't do what we want or it doesn't go our way and we think, well, they don't love me, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, or whatever the story is, you've got to deal with that or else it's going to be an ongoing battle in your relationship. So, quick recap. The dismissive avoidant needs to understand that they have not been accessing every part of themselves. They've been focusing on the one thing they've allowed themselves to have access to, usually like the sexual connection part of connection. There are so many other ways to connect, and we have got to connect in other ways. Just like there's so many foods that we need to eat to get all the vitamins we need. If we just ate potatoes for the rest of our life, we would not die, but we would not be healthy in a big picture way. And so they've got to focus on the other connection points, which requires them to identify their feelings, identify their needs, and communicate them instead of avoiding conflict. Secondly, they do need to learn how to repair after conflict and calm their nervous system. And ultimately, the best results will come from rewiring the subconscious programming. On the other side, you've got to realize your partner hasn't been telling you the truth about everything. They've been people-pleasing and avoiding conflict. There's a lot to them you don't know or understand. And so you've got to quit basing your decisions on what you've known to this point and start stepping back and looking at the big picture to create healthy communication, connection, bonding, shared experiences, problem solving to build up that vasopressin. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it gave you some insight. I see so many people that do sort of burn it all down. The dismissive avoidant that's been avoiding conflict their whole marriage is so sick of doing everything that they just burn it all down, and then they avoid getting in another relationship because they think that relationship is going to require them to keep jumping through the hoops over and over and over to keep that person happy like they did in their past. And the problem is that person doesn't want you to jump through those hoops. They want you to be sincere in what you want to do and don't want to do. They want you to be honest. They want to have an honest, open relationship with that person where there's communication and connection. And so even if you burn it all down, these issues don't go away. So you may as well heal them in the marriage that you're in if both people are willing to do the work. And of course, the subconscious work is incredibly profound and is a real game changer. So if you'd like to learn more about that, don't hesitate to set up that complimentary consultation call so you and I can chat and I can give you my best recommendation. And until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.